is true. Well, it's just about 1 after. Since I'm not sure how long this is going to, your program runs, Amy, I'm going to get us started, and I'm going to make sure everybody is muted.
Okay.
So I'm going to mute everybody. And so now everybody didn't want to do that. Can you unmute, Amy?
Yep.
Okay. Now, people, I am very pleased to invite the director of the Hershey Story and the Gardens to make a presentation this morning on the Highpoint Mansion, the home of Milton and Catherine Hershey. It's an interesting building. It's been central to Hershey since its early years, has a great history all by itself. It's been used for lots of things, and I'm sure that Amy will cover all that as we go. Amy is my boss at the museum. I've known her for almost 20 years, and just a wealth of knowledge about most anything to do with Milton Hershey. So without any further ado, I'm going to let Amy start and let you do your own introduction.
Well, thank you. Actually, Bill could do this tour, and if I can't answer any questions, I may have to call on him, because I've been at the museum for 24 years, but he's almost been there as long as me. So, and I'm coming at you from the Gardens event planning office today, which is why you see all these wedding pictures that are not me behind me. It's a little strange. So normally I would encourage questions during a tour, but we'll wait till the end. What I'm going to do is, we had a video made of just sort of what we do when we go through the house on a tour. So I'm going to be speaking to that video. If you have any questions, certainly write them down, and at the end, I'm happy to answer them. The video itself is about 35 minutes, and it covers all the spaces that we normally cover on a tour. So it's kind of nice and much better, I think, than watching just a PowerPoint with photos, although there are some historic photos sprinkled in there too. So hopefully you'll get an idea of what it's like when you're actually at the house on a tour. So, and I will apologize in advance. I've been through this video twice, and the last time it sort of stopped in the middle, and I just had to restart and fast forward a bit. So if that happens, my apologies, but it should be quickly rectified. All right. So this is the outside of Highpoint. It's a beautiful home. It's very modest for being built at the time with the means that the Hersheys had, but it was designed by an architect named C. Emlyn Urban. He was from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, was fairly well known there. He and Mr. Hershey most likely met when Mr. Hershey was living in Lancaster, and they belonged to some of the same clubs. The home is made from locally quarried limestone, and it's built in the neoclassical style, which you can see from the dental moldings, the porch, the symmetry. I do want to point out the drain downspout that you see there. The original house ended at that downspout, and then the little section in the back was added probably within 2 years to accommodate staff dining and things like that. The Hersheys did use a decorator called the Chapman Decorating Company from Philadelphia, but they also purchased a lot of things on their own from catalogs. So you see all the urns and these statues on the front porch were actually purchased from a catalog that we have at the Hershey Community Archives. So the home was built, they broke ground in 1906, and it was, the site was chosen on a hill overlooking the chocolate factory. So the chocolate factory opened in 1905. They broke ground for the house the following year, and then the Hersheys moved in 1908. It was fairly unusual for an industrialist to want to be so close to where all the action was happening and the business was going on. The smell of chocolate was certainly not bad, but the train noise is terrible. And typically when I'm giving this part of the talk outside, the train decides to, pull up and blow its whistle. So I can tell you it was very loud down there. Those are the smokestacks at the Hershey power plant. That is actually how the house was heated. Most of the major buildings in Hershey were heated that way as well. They produced steam at the factory to run the machines and also ran pipes to all the major buildings in town, including the hotel and the school. So you could see melted snow over the steam pipes going up the hill during the winter. We're entering the front of the house. The house was used as many things over the years. So the Hersheys lived here. Mrs. Hershey passed away in 1915. I'll talk more about her when we get to the second floor. And then Mr. Hershey continued to live there. In 1930, he gave the house to the golf club. And then in 1970, it was purchased by the Hershey Company after being empty for 8 years, and there was talk of tearing it down. They turned it into their corporate headquarters. So you'll see some odd things like these glass panels that were installed by the Hershey Company in an effort to create some meeting spaces. So when we get around, you'll see there's a big boardroom on the first floor that's separated by glass panels. What those panels do is allow you to see that the open floor plan of the house. It was very unusual to have an open floor plan like this, but you can imagine if that glass wasn't there, it was just the columns. It was a very interesting way to design a house at that time period. The house did have electricity when it was built, as did all of the buildings built by Milton Hershey, which was unusual. Only about 10% of homes had electricity at that time period, and especially in a rural community like Hershey. There was also, there are 3 fireplaces in the house, 2 in the main house, 1 in an office space that was constructed for Milton Hershey, and they were always gas fireplaces. So this skylight is actually, when you're in the entry hall and you look straight up through the opening in the ceiling, this originally was in the roof of the house. When the Hershey Company moved in, they lowered it. So it's actually like the ceiling on the second floor. It was designed and installed by the Rudy Glass Company, which is located in York, Pennsylvania. And they did all of the stained glass throughout the house. They did the windows at the Circular at the Hotel Hershey. They did the swimming pool in the community building. The original Trust building has a beautiful stained glass ceiling on the second floor. So that was the same company that he used for everyone. And coincidentally, all of those buildings were also designed by C. Emlyn Urban. So when Mr. Hershey found someone that he liked, he used them a lot. The entryway was designed to house this cut glass torchère, which is a very large electric lamp. If you have been to the Hershey Story Museum, you've probably seen it on exhibit there. It was originally designed for the 1893 Columbian Exposition. Milton Hershey purchased it in 1900 to put into a soda fountain that he operated in Philadelphia. It was moved out of Highpoint when he apparently found some kids throwing toilet paper from the second floor onto it during an event at the country club. This room is just when you walk in the front door to the right. It was initially called the library on the plans, but it's actually more of a parlor. We don't think they ever used it as a library. There's not much original furniture in here. However, the mantle and the chandelier are both original, and some pieces of the silver in the cabinet. There are some original push button light switches too, which you'll see in just a moment. This is a photo of the room as it was furnished when the Hersheys lived there. And the reason that we don't have a lot of furniture in some rooms, but we do have furniture in others, is that when Mrs. Hershey died, most of her things were given away. And when Mr. Hershey died, there was an auction of a lot of his belongings. So things that were not, that were stored at Milton Hershey School, some of it was kept. Some executives bought pieces and gave them back to the museum. So we've been able to collect some things, but not all. This ceiling, though it looks like the original ceiling in the photo, is a recreation because when the Hershey Company moved in, they had to install sprinklers. They put can lights in a lot of areas and smoke detectors. So in this room, they recreated the ceiling. Unfortunately, that isn't the case in most other spaces, as we'll see when we get into the dining room. The wallpaper on the walls is similar to what would have been in that time period based on photographs, but is not original. The Hershey Trust Company moved into this space to use it as their offices after the chocolate company left. So they moved in 1991. And since the early 2000s, they've really been making a huge effort to bring it back to the way that it looked when the Hersheys lived there, which is why now we're able to do these tours. So we're really excited about all of the work that they've done. This is the dining room. This is just next to the parlor. Just about everything, with the exception of the mirror that you see on the wall, is original. The screen in front of the window, which isn't really a screen because it's clear glass, we believe was placed there to help stop breezes coming through the window in the summertime when it would have been open, because there was no air conditioning in the house when the Hersheys lived here. This is a great photo of what it looked like when they were there, and you can see a lot of the pieces that we have. To the left, where the china cabinet is, where there's a door, that would have taken you back to sort of the working areas of the house, which would have been the pantry, the kitchen, and the laundry. Unfortunately, we don't have any photographs of those spaces. Most of the photos we have are of the first floor. And all the pieces in these cabinets are original and were owned and used by the Hersheys. And I should say that all of the pieces in this house that are original are either part of the Milton Hershey School's Department of School History or the Hershey Story Museum collection. This is a great photo of Mr. Hershey at, I believe it was one of his birthday parties. And if you look at the chandelier, there's actually glass crystals hanging from it. Currently, at some point, someone removed the crystals and put fringe on there. So that's not original, but the rest of the light is. And again, the wallpaper was chosen because it's reminiscent of what was in there based on photos and what was appropriate for the time historically. And in a moment, you're going to see a close-up underneath the table where there's a little button that could be pushed by the Hersheys. A little hard to see, but it's right there. They could push that button when they were eating, and it would summon someone from the kitchen to come and bring food or clear their dishes. Originally, there was a electrical cord going from there to the floor where it was plugged in. And this table has a lot of leaves that could be expanded a lot more than it is. We're heading down a hallway to the breakfast room, one of my favorite places. You can see from here that it's just beautiful on a sunny day. There's windows all around. It's octagonal, which is kind of reminiscent of the round circular at the hotel. And also Milton Hershey had a home in Cuba that had a similar space that was round, clearly a design feature he liked. The hallway that you just went through is this dark carpeted area here. It was actually part of a much larger enclosed porch that was removed when the Hershey Company moved into the building and they constructed that hallway, probably because it was in disrepair. The Hersheys loved spending time in this room, and you can see that it's just gorgeous. The grounds outside of the house were very well landscaped. They had an Italian garden, a Japanese garden, a rock garden. So it would have been lovely to sit here and have breakfast and see all these beautiful views. And then in 1939, when the country club had been there for a while, they built that limestone building, kind of obscuring some of those great views, that you can kind of see through the window. The locker rooms for the country club had been in the basement, and they were running out of space, so they built a new addition for the men's locker room, and the women's locker room stayed downstairs. And this is a photo of the Hersheys entertaining. This is Kitty, and Milton Hershey was on the end. One of the great features of this room is a stained glass ceiling, and you can see there were some hinges and latches up there. They could open up those panels and change light bulbs because there is a solid roof on top of that ceiling, so it's not a skylight, it's lit electrically from above. And again, this is a Rudy Glass Company project. And just like the outside of the house and surrounding the open area of the entry foyer, there are a lot of columns in this space as well. Now we're heading over to the other side of the first floor, and we're going to go into the billiard room. So there was originally a billiard table in this space. We have the receipt for it. Unfortunately, we don't have the table. This is a very masculine space. All of the wood paneling is original and the ceiling beams. You'll see a lot of heavily carved wooden furniture. That was also original to the Hershey's living here. This was used as a dining space when the country club was in here. We'll see a photo of that in a moment. This would have been where Milton Hershey met with executives, or men after dinner would go to this room, smoke cigars. That piece of furniture right there is a humidor. So that would have been, there's a big drawer inside where they could have stored cigars. There's a mural around the top of the walls, and those are scenes from the book Ivanhoe. We don't know who painted it, and we're not sure. Apparently, Mr. Hershey liked that book because the first student home that was built at Milton Hershey School was also named Ivanhoe. And you can see this sort of line, it's very faint there. There used to be a doorway on one of the walls that led you to a small powder room. And that was removed. Oh, here it is, you can see right there. That was removed when the Hershey Company moved in, and they kind of painted over the space. All of the original bathrooms were removed during that renovation.
Amy, one of the interesting things is that all the bathrooms had stained glass windows in.
Yep. Yep. You're going to see this table in a photo of the living room in just a moment. We didn't have space to put it in there, but we wanted really for people to be able to see it because it is quite something. And you'll notice this stained glass pattern in these windows will be repeated upstairs in another room that was added on along with the golf club's locker room in 1939. So they wanted to sort of continue that theme into the new space. Some of the rooms in the main house now are used as meeting rooms by the Hershey Trust Company, but they did move all of their offices out of the main house, which is great. And here's a photo of the room when it was a dining room in the country club. You can see the humidor in the corner there. This is currently used as a boardroom by the Hershey Trust Company. It was the living room when the Hersheys lived here, so there was no whiteboard. We don't have a lot of original items from this space either, but the fireplace mantle is original. This would have been where the women would have come after dinner to talk, possibly have a after dinner drink. And again, you really get a sense of the open concept plan, especially in this room, because there's no wall in the center of it like there is on the other side. So you can see the dining room across the hallway there. This is a photo, and here is the table that we currently have shown in the billiard room. And it's a great view of the torchère when it was in place as well. Again, the ceiling was changed so that they could put in health and safety features, life safety sprinklers and things, and that one was not redone. This painting is original and was hanging on this wall when the Hersheys lived here. Unfortunately, beyond knowing that it's in photographs, we don't have any information about it other than it's a painting on a textile. We don't know what it was called or who painted it. And this Victrola is actually a newer model. If you see the open doors there, that was actually the sound box where the sound came from. It doesn't have one of those brass sort of bell-shaped attachments for it. And that piece also shows up in photographs of the room. Next, we're going to head to the second floor. And I want you to notice the walls. They did a lot of paint analysis when they were restoring the house. And the walls are actually painted to look like leather. Leather was a very popular wall covering at the time for well-off people. The interesting thing is the Hersheys never had leather. They always had the walls painted to look like leather. So in true Hershey frugality, they opted for paint. They also redid, the floors were always originally that wood parquet, and they replaced them when they needed to and kept the originals when they could. One of the ways that you can tell the floors are original is at the bottom of the stairs, there are lots of dings in them from golf spikes when the building was used for the country club. And I'm really glad they left those there. I think it's a fun part of the history. There's a double staircase that goes up to the second floor. And straight ahead is the opening over the entry foyer. And then beyond that is the big stained glass window, which is directly above the front door of the house. And that room was the master bath. And as Bill said, all of the bathrooms in the house had stained glass windows in them. So there's a door there now. It's not the original door, but it would have been the door that came from Mrs. Hershey's bedroom into the space. And then there was a wall across the front with a door from the hall. They removed it when the Hershey company moved in. Thankfully, they kept all the stained glass. But this was used as a waiting area for people who were coming to meet with executives at the chocolate company. There were originally rooms on the second floor of the house. Mrs. Hershey had a room on the left where that door is. Mr. Hershey had a bedroom directly behind it, and then there were two guest rooms on the other side of the hallway. Mrs. Hershey's room was pink. Mr. Hershey's room was gold with blue carpeting, and then the other two rooms were blue and green. Unfortunately, we don't have photos of those either. One way that you can tell what floors are new and what are original, you can see the dark trim goes around those glass panels. Those panels were added in 1970. So they are not original, and when they put the floors in, they outlined them. In the dining room, you can see where the dark wood goes underneath one of the glass panels, and so that's how you can kind of tell on the first floor, in addition to the golf spike damage, what areas are new and what are not. The majority of the second floor was replaced. When the Hershey company was in, it was all wall-to-wall carpeting, and when they pulled it up in the early 2000s, they replaced them. This is a marriage certificate for Milton and Kitty Hershey. They got married on May 25th in 1898. Kitty Hershey was the daughter of Irish immigrants. She lived in Jamestown, New York. She dropped out of high school to work at a jewelry store and was visiting some friends who worked in a candy shop. And Milton Hershey happened to come in on a sales call. So they started a relationship. They dated for about a year. And then in 1898, they were married in the rectory of St. Patrick's Cathedral, likely because Milton Hershey was Mennonite and she was Catholic. There were only two witnesses. We don't know who they are. And by all accounts, their marriage was a complete shock to everyone. I think most people, he was 41, she was 14 years younger. I think most people thought that he was just going to be a bachelor forever. He was a huge workaholic. No one saw this coming, especially his mother, who was a little taken aback by her fancy clothes. I think in the beginning, things were a bit rocky when he brought Kitty home to live with him and his mother. His mother quickly moved out of their house, and I think things improved greatly after that. These are some great photos of them traveling. in this one, Kitty is in the back of the car. So about 3 years into their marriage, Kitty started to suffer from the effects of a progressive neurological disease. She had a lot of mobility issues, a lot of vision issues. Eventually in 1915, she died of pneumonia. Milton Hershey always carried a photo of her. She was very instrumental in his philanthropies, and they had a wonderful marriage. This is a room that we have set up to look like her bedroom. It is one of what was originally one of the guest rooms, and I'll explain that when we get to the other side of the house. The furniture and pieces in here are original. There are oral histories about her big brass bed in her bedroom. You can see the chest over there has beautiful inlay work. And then in a moment, we're going to zoom in on some silver pieces. So when they married in 1898, Milton Hershey, we believe, gave her this toiletry set. It was purchased from the Gorham Silver Company, which was located in New England, was a very popular silver manufacturer. It's very ornate, and it's actually engraved with KSH. So her name was Catherine, spelled with a C. He always called her Kitty, as did lots of other people. So we have, it's a much larger set. I believe there's 22 pieces in it. Some of them are on exhibit at the museum. Some of them are here. 2 of them are actually still with descendants of the Hershey family. Milton Hershey gave the set to the daughter of Ezra Hershey, who was his first cousin when she got married, and then she gave it to her son to give to his children. They kept 2 pieces for his daughters and gave the rest to us. So that's one of the ways we've been able to get back some of the items that were given away or sold after the Hersheys both died. There's a stained glass window where that vase is behind the chair there, and that was actually originally the bathroom that was located between the 2 guest rooms. As I said, they took all of those out. They enlarged a couple of bedrooms to make them bigger offices. And then, so there's 2 bedrooms on either side of the hallway, and they each have a little area outside of them that was carved out so that administrative assistants could sit there and they could put file cabinets in there. So the upstairs is kind of chopped up a little bit, but you still get a sense of what the design was. There was actually another master bedroom that was slated to be built on top of the billiard room in the drawings, the architectural drawings, but it was never put in. And then this across the hall is shown as Milton Hershey's bedroom. This was originally Kitty's space, but after she died and he moved to an apartment upstairs during the country club years, this was his bedroom, and then his original bedroom was turned into a sitting room. So it's kind of arranged a bit differently now, but we wanted people to be able to kind of see it both ways. He has beautiful furniture in this space. And as we go around, you will see paintings of his parents. His father's name was Henry Hershey, and his mother's name was Veronica Snavely. Everyone called her Fanny, and Milton Hershey's middle name is Snavely for her maiden name. They had a very interesting relationship. His mother was a pretty strict Mennonite. His father was not strict really about anything. He was always trying new job opportunities, but was not very good at holding jobs. They had a very difficult childhood, mostly because they moved around so much when Milton Hershey was young. They did have another child named Serena when Milton Hershey was 6, and she died at the age of 4. So we're not really sure what she died of, but that was clearly a blow to their already struggling marriage. After Milton Hershey went to be an apprentice, his father moved out, traveled around the US, and tried new things, and they never really reconciled. It's very interesting, though, because it seems like Milton Hershey was able to get his mother's sort of determination and hard work ethic and his father's ability to take risks and willingness to try new things. And so he got these great attributes from both of them and really maintained very close relationships with them until they died and took care of both of them in their later years. So I think it's wonderful that it turned out that way, because it could have easily, not. And there's a toiletry set that belonged to Mr. Hershey. opera glasses. Now we're going into what was used as his sitting room during the years that the country club was on the first floor. You can see there's photos of Kitty on top of the radio, and that little space is actually based on a photograph that you're going to see in a moment. So it's been recreated. The radio, the lamp, the card table, and the slip cover are all were purchased to put in the space or made to put in the space, but everything else is original. So the chairs, the ottoman, all the cigar paraphernalia on that small table. This bookcase was also originally in the house. That's William Shakespeare on the top there. You can see neither of the Hersheys that we're aware of were big readers, and you can see that none of those spines have ever really been cracked. So I think it was more for show. Mr. Hershey really loved reading newspapers and got several newspapers that he read every day. The loving cup on the left was actually a gift to him on the 10th anniversary of the town. And there's the photo I was talking about. The loving cup was a gift from his employees on the 10th anniversary of the town. So in 1913, there was a huge parade. All of his employees at the chocolate factory were on floats in the parade. There was bunting everywhere around town. It was really, really something. And I love the fact that in his later years, he was sitting at a card table. Reminds me of my grandmother. He had all that money and he would just sit at a card table and read the newspaper. If you look on the table here, you can see there's a few burn marks from where he would leave cigars sitting when he was smoking them. That's a little penknife. And I love the little ottoman that's a rocker. I'm such a fidgeter. I think I could benefit from, from one of those. There's some close-ups of the loving cup. Next, we're going to be going to the solarium. So this room was actually built on top of the locker room in 1939, and its purpose was to give Milton Hershey a space to be able to go outside. So there was a door that went out to the roof. The roof was originally rubber, and there was a few inches of water on the top that they used for insulation, and then there were potted plants everywhere. There was a small pond that ducks would come back to every year. TV was not there when Mr. Hershey was there. That's actually the roof of the breakfast room to give you an idea of where we are. And you'll see the stained glass up above looks just like what was in the billiard room downstairs. So I like how they tried to tie those two spaces together. It was often called Atlantic City because they had a little boardwalk built out there that Milton Hershey could use to walk outside. It was probably a really nice space for him to go to, because you can imagine with the hole in the floor down to the country club right outside his bedroom and sitting room, he would have heard a lot. So it was good to be able to go to the back of the house. This area of the house is original. The skylights and everything, this hallway, were all added on when the Hershey Company moved in. This is the part of the house where staff bedrooms were located. We're only really aware of one staff person who lived on site. I imagine that's because the Hersheys traveled so much, it didn't really make sense for them to have a lot of people living there when they were going to be gone for months at a time. So when they needed people to come in and do laundry and help in the kitchen, they probably had people come in during the day. We've been doing a lot of research on who was actually helping to run the house. It originally had 22 rooms, and it wasn't large by any means, but it did take some work to keep things moving. So we have some information on 3 staff people that we know of. This is Bertha Candoni. She was from Austria. Her husband passed away and she became kind of a nurse's aide. She spoke 7 different languages, and she had been traveling with some wealthy people throughout Europe and helping them on their travels. And they were introduced to Bertha by a doctor that Kitty had seen in Europe. And so they hired her to kind of be Kitty's companion when they were traveling, because, as I said, she had mobility issues and things, and she really needed someone to be with her. And then when they were back in Hershey, she lived in the house. So she would have been living in that section in the back of the house. And that is one of their dogs, Duke. This man we recently learned of. We had seen his name in an oral history, but we did some census research and found it's Joseph Wills. He was a butler for the Hersheys. And the interesting thing about him is during the 1910 census, he was actually living in a boarding house downtown. And Ezra Hershey, who was Milton Hershey's first cousin and would eventually become treasurer of the chocolate company, was also living in the same boarding house at that time. There's a really wonderful story about a tree in the front of Highpoint where a platform had been built near the top, and there was a ramp that went up sort of around the tree to get to the platform. And Joseph used to push Mrs. Hershey out there in her wheelchair so that she could be outside and kind of have a bird's eye view of what was going on the property. And it was actually called the Bird's Nest. And then the final person that we know about was named Clayton Lehman. He actually worked for the Hersheys when they were living at the homestead between the time they were in Lancaster and Highpoint was built. And he was eventually asked by Mr. Hershey to come to Highpoint and sort of run the house there. So he was in charge of minor repairs and calling people in when there were bigger problems, overseeing the landscaping and things like that. So he was he moved to Highpoint after Mrs. Hershey died, but ended up staying there even when the country club moved in. He sort of continued in that role. Fortunately, none of the landscaping is still around up there, but it's still a very nice space to have a meeting. This is the backyard. The Hersheys did a lot of entertaining when they were home in Hershey. And you can see the outline here of what was a little reflecting pond that had a fountain in it. We have lots of photos of them posing on these benches with friends. There's climbing hydrangea on the pergola. Everybody always wants to know what that is. There's a photo of them. Mrs. Hershey is over here. There's Mr. Hershey leaning on the fountain. Unfortunately, we don't know who all of those people are, but there are lots of photos with them. And then this is Mrs. Hershey in this photo and Mr. Hershey right there. Golf has always been a huge part of Hershey, and eventually when the country club moved in, they had just finished building the golf course that right now goes through the front yard basically. These are some photos of people enjoying the grounds. As I mentioned, they had all these beautiful landscaped gardens, and they really invited people in the community to enjoy them as well. They didn't try to keep everyone out. This is the Dairy Church Schoolhouse, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with, right behind your church. And Milton Hershey actually attended school there briefly. As I mentioned, he moved around a lot as a child, and he attended about 9 one-room schoolhouses that we know of. And he always said he only ever had a 4th grade education. So what he was able to accomplish with that is a pretty amazing story. I love, some of my favorite pictures of the schoolhouse are when the country club was located in the house. They used it as their caddy shack. So there's some great photos of boys hanging out there waiting in the morning. I would like to end my tours with a quick discussion of the Hershey entities and sort of how everything fits together in Hershey, because it's a little bit, I think, confusing, especially for people who aren't from Hershey. But these are photos of the Hershey Industrial School. As you probably know, it was founded by Mr. and Mrs. Hershey in 1909. for white orphan boys between the ages of 4 and 8. And over the years, they've changed that. So in 1968, boys of color were admitted. In the late 1970s, I believe 1976, girls were able to be admitted. And so today, they have over 2,000 students. They have the opportunity to earn, tens of thousands of dollars for college, and everything is paid for. It's completely free. And the biggest requirement is that children are in sort of financial and social need. So the school started in 1909, and then in 1918, Milton Hershey took his holdings in the chocolate company and put them into a trust for the school. So that is the Milton Hershey School Trust, that today is worth more than $16 billion. The Hershey Trust Company's biggest job is to manage that trust. So you hear people talk about the trust. It's actually kind of two different things. The Hershey Trust Company, which started as the community's bank, and then the Milton Hershey School Trust, which is the pot of money. In the 1930s, after he had accumulated some more wealth, he took 500 shares of Hershey stock and he put those into a trust for the M.S. Hershey Foundation. The foundation's mission is to provide educational and cultural opportunities in Derry Township. Originally, the foundation operated the Hershey Junior College and then the Education and Cultural Center that was operated out of the community building. And today, the foundation operates the Hershey Story Museum, Hershey Gardens, Hershey Community Archives, and the Hershey Theater. And so the Hershey Trust Company also manages our trust. So we're two separate entities with two separate pots of money, both managed by the Hershey Trust Company. Because of the donation or the money from the company that Milton Hershey put into trust in 1918, the school owns about 80% of the voting stock of the Hershey Company. So though they don't own the entire company, in essence, whatever they vote is how things go. They also own 100% of Hershey Entertainment and Resorts Company. So that's kind of how as part of the Milton Hershey School Trust portfolio. So when you buy things from the chocolate company or take advantage of businesses owned by HE&R, you're in essence supporting the school. So that is all I have. Because it's a video, we had to be kind of quick. So if you have any questions at all, I'm happy to answer them for you.
If you do have questions, please unmute because I have you all muted. So just unmute yourself and ask a question. But thank you, Amy. That was very informative.
Sure, happy to. Are you surprised by anything in the house?
Who, me?
Anybody. People who haven't been there before.
Debbie, I see you're ready.
No, my question wasn't about the house. Was I surprised by anything in the house? I don't guess so. I mean, I've always have heard that he was a frugal individual, but
yeah. Oh, and I should mention this room, if you will, over here was actually built to be an office for Milton Hershey, but he never used it for that. He preferred to be either in the factory or the trust building, or sometimes at a building at Milton Hershey School. So he really liked to be where things were happening. It ended up being a very nice space for his chauffeur to hang out in when he was waiting around. It's a lovely space. Unfortunately, we can't get into it on the tour because they do have an office in there.
How did he make the decision to have the country club in the house where he was living?
I think because, well, for most winters between 1960 through the early 1930s, he was never there. So he was in Cuba most of the time. So I think it was a combination of, it was a big house for one person. He was living alone, and he really liked to be social and have people around. And it was a good place to build the golf course. And I think that it was kind of a logical next step for the house. He didn't want to move out of it and have it be empty. Never one to waste things. So, he had actually invited a bunch of his friends and business associates to a meal. And at the end of it, he had them look under their plates, and there were charter memberships to the country club. So that's kind of how it started. Interestingly, he did sleep at Hotel Hershey quite a bit too. So I think when there were events happening at the country club, he would go elsewhere.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
My question was about the Columbia Exposition.
Mhm.
Is that also where he got chocolate making equipment?
Yes. So he went there, it was in 1893, and we know that he purchased 2 pieces of equipment while he was there, and then he came home and quickly purchased 2 more. So he set them up in the basement of the Lancaster Caramel Company, and he started experimenting with chocolate. And in the beginning, he was making dark chocolate for the most part. And he had a lot of different sort of specialty novelty chocolates. He had, and by the time he opened the chocolate company, he was producing over 100 different novelty chocolates that were dark. And then eventually he started experimenting with milk chocolate recipes, and that's what he focused on once he got into opened the chocolate factory in Hershey. But that is where he bought his first 2 pieces. And sort of unrelated, but there's a really good book about the Columbian Exposition called Devil in the White City.
Yes. Yeah.
Have you read that?
Yes. Yeah.
I found it fascinating. It
Oh,
doesn't talk
my.
about Milton Hershey at all, but the parts about the exposition are so interesting, and to see, like, hear about what he was going to is just fascinating to me.
It's a shame they tore that all down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jack, I saw you had a question.
Yeah, this
Or
is
Mary.
anybody that can answer it. Since our church is so close, do we have any record of him attending our church?
I've heard some anecdotal stories about him attending a couple of churches, and I believe the other one was the Methodist church, and he would sort of go in after service started, sit in the back, and then leave before it ended. And I can tell you, I think it was in an oral history. I'm not sure whose it was, but I've never heard of him regularly attending any of the churches in Hershey.
Yeah, I just thought that all you had to do was walk down the hill.
I know.
And there we were. So
Yep.
I mean, I thought maybe on a Christmas or something he might have did that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure.
Mary, you had a question?
I have another
Mary?
one. Can I ask another one?
I can't,
Sure.
I think Mary's talking, but we can't hear her. But she doesn't seem to be muted. If she wants to type it in the chat box, I would be able to see it there.
I can't see.
If you look at the bottom of your screen, Mary, there should be a little box that says chat, and then you can type it in. But in the meantime, Debbie, did you have another question?
Oh, my question was about the glass.
Mhm.
Is Rudy, is it RUDY?
Yes,
Yes.
Because I think we have some at the church.
you could.
I mean, windows, I would say exactly the same as the circular dining room.
Mhm. There is a good chance. They were used quite a lot in Hershey.
I don't think the architect did anything, but the glass, RUDY, that's what
They still exist. I think that the original company was bought out at some point, and they've sort of changed what they've made over time, but there is a glass company somewhere in York that's still operating.
nothing from Mary.
Did Mary figure out her problem?
No.
The one thing that I always found fascinating about the house that many people are not aware of is that it was so close to town compared to other people of wealth that own big tycoons. They would move further away. But the property was open. He invited people in so that you could find people walking the grounds literally any time of the day or night because of the weird shifts that people worked. And it was a great place to go to relax and just be comfortable. But I just cannot imagine that happening today.
Yeah.
I mean, I just can't imagine it. Just totally contrary. Well, Amy, I don't
Bill,
see anybody.
Yeah, Bill, you give tours of this?
Pardon?
You
I
give.
do.
Yes.
What I was
Sure.
going to ask is the hours that you're open for tours.
They give tours on that you order them through through the museum, through the Hershey story. They give tours on Thursday morning, Friday morning, and 4 tours on Saturday. And they're taking orders. I don't know if there's any available yet through the end of this month.
There are some
And then-
available at the end of August, and then we're opening up September tours. Beginning in September, they're only going to be on Saturdays because the trust company is planning to come back. The reason we're giving tours is because they've been out of the office. And they're going to be back in the office, so we can't do weekdays anymore. So we'll be doing Saturdays only. But tours for the following month will become available on the 15th of the prior month. So look for those to open back up.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I meant to check on the rest of this month before this, and I didn't have a chance to see what was available, but they will be closer to the end of the month.
Well,
Thank you
I
so
don't-
much.
Sure.
yeah, appreciate it, Amy. And I hope the rest enjoy this as much as I do. I find it a fascinating place to go through. I've not yet seen a ghost of either Milton or Kitty, but there are times that you see these wispies and you just hope it would be, and then you find it's a branch blowing outside or something. But it's a fascinating house. It just is, and I cannot imagine what it must have been like when they lived there. I mean, by the time they moved in, he was 53, a millionaire, just more money than he ever thought he would have, and the wife of his dreams, and just it must have just been a great relationship. Unfortunately, she was sick toward the end, and that kind of threw a damper on it. But it's just the more you study their life and their story and his story, the more fascinating it is, at least to me. It's just he's just Joe, every guy that made it to the top, but he never forgot where he came from, and he was very, very generous in a lot of ways. So,
Yeah.
Amy, I appreciate your help and your presentation. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And if anybody out, if there's last chance for questions, because we're about to call it done.
All right.
All
And
right.
feel free to
Thank you.
contact me if you have any questions. My email address is on the museum's website.
All right. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
and
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.